The execution square was already full. Snow drifted down in slow, silent sheets over the gathered crowd, settling against black coats and powdered wigs. No one spoke above a whisper. No one dared. At the center of the platform stood a young man with his hands bound behind his back. A noose hung just inches from his throat. Princess guards in crimson livery stood on either side of him, their halberds gleaming under the pale winter sun. And seated high above them all, beneath a canopy of imperial velvet, was the emperor. Cold. Unmoved. Watching. The prisoner lifted his head. His name was Adrian Vale. He was 20 years old. And he was innocent. Bring his sister forward, the emperor commanded. A path opened through the crowd as soldiers forced a young woman toward the platform. Her dark cloak dragged across the snow. Her face was pale, but her spine was straight. She did not look at the crowd. She looked only at her brother. The emperor leaned forward. "You will marry my son," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the square. The rope creaked softly in the wind. "Or your brother hangs." The snow did not stop falling. 3 months earlier. Before the rope. Before the decree. Before the choice that would shatter an empire. There had been a ball. The winter jubilee ball at the imperial palace glittered like a frozen constellation. Crystal chandeliers burned overhead. Velvet banners draped down marble columns. Gold-rimmed mirrors reflected nobility dressed in silk and legacy. And beneath it all, beneath the violins and polite laughter and delicate porcelain smiles, there was something sharper. Politics. Power. Judgment. Lady Seraphina Vale stood near the edge of the ballroom as though she occupied a different world from the one unfolding around her. Not one jewel adorned her neck. Not one diamond glittered in her hair. The only thing she wore that mattered was her surname. Vale. Once spoken with respect. Now whispered with suspicion. Her father had been the emperor's chief financial minister, architect of wartime budgets, guardian of the treasury, advisor to the throne. Until the ledgers were uncovered. Until signatures appeared authorizing illegal transfers. Until witnesses swore under oath. Until the emperor himself declared him guilty of treason. He died 2 winters later. Broken. Disgraced. And since then, Seraphina and her younger brother Adrian had existed in a peculiar state, not imprisoned, not exiled, but never fully free. Tolerated. Watched. Adrian stood beside her now, taller than most men in the room though barely 20. His jaw was tight. "They're staring," he muttered. "Let them," Seraphina said softly. "Why did we even come?" "Because when an emperor summons you, you do not refuse." Adrian's eyes darkened. "That is not the same as forgiveness." No. It wasn't. Across the ballroom, the grand doors opened. Conversation dimmed. Crown Prince Lucien entered first. Tall. Immaculate. Controlled. He wore black formal dress with silver insignia marking him as heir to the empire. His movements were deliberate. Measured. Military in precision. He did not look left or right. He did not smile. Behind him came the emperor. Red ceremonial velvet. White fur collar. A face carved from something colder than marble. The orchestra swelled. And the game began. Dances formed. Alliances whispered. Contracts considered. Seraphina did not expect attention. She was wrong. Lady Vale. The voice was smooth, but not warm. She turned. Prince Lucien stood before her. Close enough that she could see the faint scar near his temple, old, thin, almost hidden beneath dark hair. She curtsied flawlessly. "Your Highness. I was unaware the Vale family still attended court." The words were precise. Not cruel. Not kind. Calculated. We attend when commanded, she replied. His gaze flicked to Adrian. And your brother? Studying law. A flicker passed through his eyes. Dangerous profession. Particularly for a trader's son. Adrian moved, but Seraphina's fingers tightened slightly around his sleeve. The prince noticed that too. The orchestra began a waltz. You dance? He asked. Yes. He extended his hand. The room shifted. Whispers rose like smoke. The disgraced daughter. The future emperor. She placed her hand in his. The floor opened. They moved. Perfect distance. Perfect posture. No warmth. You assume much courage, he said quietly as they turned. Courage? To show your face here. I have done nothing wrong. That is not how court memory works. She met his eyes. Is that how imperial justice works? For the first time, something almost resembling interest touched his expression. Careful, he murmured. Of what? Of surviving. The dance ended. He released her hand. But he did not walk away immediately. Instead, he leaned closer, voice barely audible. Tell me, Lady Vale, if the truth about your father were proven otherwise, what would you do? The question struck like lightning. My father was innocent. You sound certain. I am. He studied her for one breath longer than was proper. Then he stepped back. And left her standing in the center of the floor beneath 100 watchful eyes. Across the ballroom, the emperor had not looked away once. Not once. If you feel that tightening in your chest right now. If you sense that something darker is already moving beneath this glittering palace. Stay with this story. Because what happens next will test loyalty, love, and power in ways neither Seraphina nor the prince could foresee. And if you're drawn to stories where courage stands against empires, subscribe now, because this is only the beginning. The evening continued. But something had shifted. An hour later, Seraphina stepped onto a balcony for air. Snow fell lightly beyond the palace balustrade. Footsteps followed. She did not need to turn to know who it was. You should leave the capital, Prince Lucien said. Why? His jaw tightened slightly. Because storms gather quietly. Is that a warning, Your Highness? It is advice. From the son of the man who condemned my father. The words were sharp. But not hysterical. He did not flinch. Your father signed the ledgers. And if he did not? Lucien's eyes flickered. Then someone forged imperial documents. And you would allow that? His gaze hardened. You presume much. I presume nothing. I survive. He stepped closer. Too close. If you value your brother, he said softly, keep him away from politics. Ice slid down her spine. What do you know? He did not answer. Instead, he walked back inside. And at that moment, Seraphina understood something with sudden clarity. This ball had not been invitation. It had been inspection. 3 nights later, imperial guards arrived at the Vale estate. They came before dawn. Red cloaks. Steel helmets. Official warrants. Adrian was taken in chains. Charge, conspiracy against the crown. Evidence, newly uncovered correspondence linking him to dissident reformists. Fabricated. Impossible. Seraphina demanded audience. She was granted one. And so. Snow fell over the execution square. Crowds gathered. A rope waited. Her brother stood beneath it. And the emperor leaned forward. You will marry my son, he said. Or your brother hangs. Snow did not soften the sound of rope against wood. It creaked. Slowly. Deliberately. The execution platform stood at the center of the imperial square, black timber stark against the white morning frost. A sea of citizens pressed inward, breath turning to mist in the winter air. Nobles watched from elevated balconies. Soldiers formed a perimeter in polished formation. Adrian Vale stood bound beneath the gallows. His coat had been removed. His wrists were raw where the rope cut into his skin. But his back was straight. He searched the crowd only once. And found her. Seraphina stepped forward as guards forced a path through the snow. She did not tremble. She would not give the crowd that satisfaction. The emperor's voice carried easily from his raised imperial dais. "You have been charged with conspiracy against the crown," he declared to Adrian. Silence. "You deny it?" Adrian's voice did not waver. "I deny lies." Murmurs rippled through the square. The emperor's gaze shifted to Seraphina. "You requested this audience," he said. "I demand proof of the charges," she replied evenly. Gasps. "Demand. From a traitor's daughter." The emperor leaned back in his chair. "Proof exists. Then present it publicly." His eyes hardened. "You mistake this for a negotiation." The rope swayed gently above Adrian's head. "Your son danced with me 3 nights ago," Seraphina said. "A calculated risk." The prince stood beside his father in dark military formalwear, posture rigid, expression unreadable. The emperor did not look at him. "My son dances with many," he replied coldly. "Then perhaps he should dance with justice as well." The square stilled. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. The emperor stood. He descended the platform steps slowly. Each movement deliberate. He stopped only a few feet from Seraphina. "You will marry my son," he said quietly, though the entire square heard it. "And your brother lives." The word struck like a physical blow. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Marriage. To the heir. To the throne. The rope above Adrian creaked again. "And if I refuse?" she asked. The emperor did not blink. "He hangs at dawn." A collective breath froze in the winter air. Seraphina turned toward her brother. His eyes were fierce. "No," Adrian said sharply. "Do not." A guard struck him across the back of the knee. He fell to one side. Seraphina did not scream. She had learned long ago that power feeds on visible grief. She looked instead at the prince. Lucien had not moved. Had not spoken. But something in his jaw was tight. Almost white. "You would bind a throne through coercion?" she asked him directly. His voice came measured. "This is not my decree. But it would be your marriage." Silence. The emperor stepped forward again. "You have until sunset." He signaled to the guards. Adrian was dragged from the platform. The noose remained swinging. A reminder. A promise. Seraphina was escorted not home, but to the palace. Her brother was returned to an iron-barred cell beneath it. Deliberate proximity. She was placed in a private chamber overlooking the frozen gardens. Guards stationed outside. Not prisoner. Not free. A servant entered with warm wine and fresh linens. She did not touch them. The door opened again. Prince Lucien entered alone. He dismissed the guards with a glance. They obeyed. The door shut. Silence stretched between them. "You will refuse," he said finally. It was not a question. "Will you?" she countered. He did not answer. Snow fell outside the tall windows. "You could stop this," she said quietly. "You assume much. You are heir to the empire. And he is emperor. Her eyes did not leave his. Is this your will? A pause. His voice lowered. If you marry me, your brother lives. That is not what I asked. He stepped closer. You believe your father was innocent. I know he was. And you believe this is connected. Yes. And if it is? Then this is not a marriage, she said. It is consolidation. The words landed. He watched her carefully. You are not afraid, he observed. I am terrified, she replied honestly. But fear does not negotiate with tyrants. Something flickered across his face. Brief. Gone. You have until sunset, he repeated. And if I accept? Your brother will be released under imperial protection. And if I refuse? He held her gaze. He hangs. The brutality of the statement felt different coming from him. Colder. More contained. You would live with that, she asked. His jaw tightened. I live with many things. The room felt smaller. You warned me to leave the capital. Yes. Why? His eyes darkened slightly. Because storms gather quietly. And this storm? He stepped back toward the door. This storm is already here. He left without another word. Below the palace, in a cell barely lit by a single torch, Adrian sat chained to the wall. Bootsteps echoed down the corridor. The prince entered alone. Adrian laughed bitterly. Come to measure the rope? Lucian stopped outside the bars. You should have left the capital. I did nothing. Your correspondence suggests otherwise. Fabricated. Lucian studied him. You are remarkably calm for a man facing execution. I am calm because I know this is larger than me. The prince's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. My father uncovered something before he died, Adrian said. Something in the treasury. The prince did not react. Records. What kind of records? Imperial. A beat. Lucian's voice remained neutral. Careful. Careful is how innocent men die. The prince leaned closer. What did he find? Adrian smiled faintly. You don't know. For the first time. Uncertainty crossed the prince's face. You truly don't know, Adrian continued softly. Which means this isn't your design. Bootsteps approached from the far corridor. Lucian stepped back immediately, composure restored. You have until sunset, he said. Then pray she chooses wisely. He turned and walked away. But something had shifted. Back in her chamber, Seraphina stood at the window. Sunlight had begun to fade. Shadows lengthened across the snow. The palace bells tolled the 6th hour. Sunset approached. A servant entered quietly. The emperor requests your answer. Seraphina closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was no hesitation left. Prepare the audience hall, she said. If I must sell myself to save my brother. Her voice steadied. Then I will choose the terms. The servant hesitated. Your ladyship. Seraphina turned from the window. I will marry the prince. The words felt like iron. But not as prisoner. As twilight bled across the capital, torches were lit in the imperial hall. The emperor sat waiting. The prince stood beside him. The court gathered. And Seraphina Vale entered. Head high. Spine straight. She did not kneel. I accept, she said clearly. Gasps. But under one condition. The emperor's brow lifted slightly. You negotiate poorly for someone with a brother beneath a noose. I negotiate precisely because I do. Silence deepened. My brother is released immediately, she said. Not at dawn. Not after vows. Now. A long pause. The emperor studied her. Then he smiled faintly. Very well. He signaled to a guard. Release him. A ripple of shock moved through the nobles. Seraphina did not look at Lucian. She did not dare. Then we are agreed, the emperor said. The bells of the palace rang. The engagement was declared. Snow fell heavier outside. And somewhere in the darkness beneath the palace, iron chains were unlocked. But not all storms are stopped by compromise. Some only change direction. The bells that announced Seraphina's engagement to the crown prince rang across the capital like a verdict. By morning, the newspapers had already rewritten her name. From daughter of a traitor to future empress. The city did not celebrate. It speculated. Some called it mercy. Others called it leverage. Most understood it for what it was. A spectacle. Adrian was released just before midnight. Not escorted home. Escorted to a guarded residence under imperial supervision. Freedom with invisible chains. When Seraphina saw him at dawn, she did not embrace him immediately. She checked his wrists first. Raw. Bruised. Alive. You shouldn't have done it, he said. You shouldn't have been under a rope. You don't know what this means. Yes, she replied quietly. I do. She turned toward the tall windows overlooking the palace gardens. It means father was right. Adrian stilled. You're certain? He warned me before he died. He said the treasury was bleeding. Not from thieves, from inside. Adrian's jaw tightened. The emperor? I don't know. But this isn't punishment, she continued. This is containment. Adrian stepped closer. You think the engagement is to silence us? Yes. And Lucian? She hesitated. I don't know what he knows. The imperial palace moved differently now. Servants bowed lower to Seraphina. Nobles forced smiles. But beneath the silk and ceremony, whispers sharpened. The emperor announced that the wedding would take place in 3 weeks. Swift. Controlled. No time for doubt to grow. No time for truth to surface. That evening, Seraphina was summoned to the crown prince's private study. It was not ostentatious. No gilded excess. Just dark wood, military maps, and shelves of bound law volumes. Lucian stood at his desk when she entered. He did not greet her formally. You spoke of your father uncovering something, he said without preamble. You spoke of fabricated correspondence, she countered. They studied one another. Measured. You believe my father orchestrated your brother's arrest, he said. I believe someone fears what we know. And what do you know? Not enough. He walked toward the window. Snow had stopped. The sky was iron gray. My father does not act without purpose, he said. That does not mean he acts without guilt. His gaze sharpened. You walk a dangerous line. I have lived on dangerous lines since I was 16. Silence. Then. He reached into a drawer and withdrew a folded parchment. Your father's final treasury audit, he said. She stepped forward slowly. You have this? It was sealed in restricted archives. And you accessed it? He did not answer directly. She unfolded it. Columns of numbers. Transactions. Authorizations. Then. One signature. Imperial crest. Overlapping ink. Her breath slowed. This was amended, she whispered. Lucian watched her carefully. Explain. The ink density differs. The seal was pressed twice. He stepped closer. You're certain? Yes. The room grew very still. If this ledger was altered, he said slowly, then someone manipulated the treasury records before your father's trial. And if my father refused to sign, she continued, he would have been eliminated. Lucien's jaw tightened. My father presided over that trial. Which means he either knew, she said softly. Or someone fooled the emperor. The idea hung between them like a blade. Lucien turned away sharply. You assume corruption at the highest level. I assume fear. He looked back at her. For what? For exposure. A long pause. If this is true, he said carefully, then the engagement is not mercy. It is insurance. A knock interrupted them. An imperial messenger entered with a sealed envelope. For the prince. Lucien broke the seal. His expression did not change. But something in his shoulders stiffened. What is it? She asked. He handed her the document. It was a public decree. Effective immediately. All financial records relating to the Vale investigation were to be transferred to the Imperial Vault under direct authority of the Emperor. Restricted access. Permanent classification. Seraphina's pulse slowed. He's locking it away, she said. Yes. Lucien folded the decree. He anticipates inquiry. Or he fears it. He looked at her long and hard. If you continue this line of thought, you are not only endangering yourself. I know. You are endangering me. She held his gaze. Then decide which side you stand on. The words were not challenge. They were invitation. Later that night, in his private chambers, Lucien stood alone. He unlocked a small iron coffer. Inside were documents he had never shown anyone. His father's private military expenditures. Transfers not approved by Parliament. Funds moved without record. He had dismissed them as wartime necessity. Now. He wasn't certain. A soft knock. Enter. His most trusted aide, Captain Reinhardt, stepped inside. You requested the background files on the Vale arrest. Yes. They were expedited unusually fast. How fast? Within hours of your dance at the Jubilee Ball. Lucien stilled. Explain. The arrest warrant was drafted before the alleged correspondence was discovered. Silence. You're certain? Yes, Your Highness. Lucien dismissed him with a wave. He stood very still after the door closed. The storm had not gathered quietly. It had been engineered. Meanwhile, Seraphina did not sleep. She sat at her desk with the amended ledger open. One question circled her mind. If not the Emperor, then who? Someone with access to the treasury. Someone powerful enough to influence trials. Someone who benefited from her father's removal. Her eyes drifted to one column of figures. Military expansion budgets. Redirected funds. New armament contracts. Private signatories. Her breath caught. One name repeated 3 times. General Matthias Orloff. The Emperor's chief military strategist. And the only man who had testified most aggressively against her father during the trial. The next morning, as frost glazed the palace gardens, Seraphina requested audience with the prince again. When she entered, she did not curtsy. She placed the ledger on his desk. Your father may not be the architect, she said quietly. Lucien looked down. He saw the name. Orloff. The silence stretched longer this time. He commands half the imperial army, Lucien said carefully. He commands loyalty, she replied. And influence. And motive? Lucien exhaled slowly. If Orloff manipulated the treasury and framed your father, then the execution of my brother was not leverage. It was distraction. Their eyes met. And something unspoken passed between them. This was no longer about marriage. It was about empire. But storms do not wait politely. By afternoon, word spread through the court. General Orloff had been appointed chief overseer of the royal wedding security. He would control palace access, guest lists, archive transport, movement of guards, containment. Lucien read the announcement twice. Then looked up at Seraphina. He knows, she said softly. Or suspects. And if he suspects, he will move faster. The bells of the palace began to ring again. Not for celebration. For announcement. The wedding date had been moved. From 3 weeks. To 7 days. 7 days. That was all the empire would allow. 7 days until Seraphina Vale became crown princess by decree. Or disappeared by design. The palace no longer glittered. It tightened. Guards doubled along corridors. Invitations were revised and re-revised. Servants were replaced without explanation. Entire wings were restricted for security protocol. General Matthias Orloff moved through the palace like a blade sheathed in silk. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Silver at his temples. His uniform immaculate. His voice always calm. Too calm. Seraphina saw him first in the East Gallery. He bowed with perfect courtesy. Your future highness, he said. She did not correct the title. General. His eyes were pale and assessing. You must feel honored, he continued. To rise so swiftly. I feel watched, she replied. A faint smile touched his mouth. You are. He stepped closer. Security has increased due to recent instability. My brother's arrest. A regrettable necessity. It was fabricated. His gaze sharpened slightly. Careful. You testified against my father. Yes. And you were wrong. He did not blink. No, he said softly. I was precise. The word echoed. Precise. As if her father had not been collateral damage, but calculated removal. Lucien entered the gallery at that moment. His eyes flicked between them. General, he said coolly. Your Highness. Orloff bowed again. The wedding security preparations are proceeding flawlessly. I'm certain they are, Lucien replied. The general's gaze lingered on Seraphina for one heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he left. The air felt heavier after he did. You provoked him, Lucien said quietly once they were alone. He wanted to measure me. And I let him. Lucien's jaw tightened. He has commanded the northern campaign. He has suppressed revolts in 3 provinces. He does not lose. Everyone loses something eventually, she said. He looked at her sharply. You think he framed your father? I think he needed someone removed. And you believe he manipulates my father? She met his gaze steadily. Do you? Silence. He did not answer. That night, Adrian slipped through palace corridors with the help of Captain Reinhardt. Not openly. Not boldly. But carefully. He had convinced Lucien to allow limited movement under supervision. Officially, he was under protection. Unofficially, he was bait. Adrian entered the lower record chamber, not the sealed imperial vault, but the transitional archives where documents were catalogued before transfer. A clerk, loyal to Reinhardt, left a drawer unlocked. Adrian found it quickly. Military expenditure transfers. Orlov's authorization stamps. Amounts that dwarfed wartime necessity. Funds redirected to private armories outside parliamentary oversight. Then. One smaller entry. A transfer labeled. Special Inquiry, Vale Investigation. Authorized by M. Orlov. Not the Emperor. Adrian's pulse surged. Footsteps echoed. He slid the parchment inside his coat just as two guards entered. You are not authorized in this wing. I was told I could study legal archives. Not here. They escorted him out. But the damage was done. Meanwhile, Seraphina returned to her chambers to find her desk disturbed. Not violently. Subtly. A drawer slightly ajar. Her father's silver signet ring missing. Her pulse slowed. Orlov. A soft knock. She opened the door. Lucian stood there. Without formality. Your brother found something, he said. So did I. She stepped aside. He entered. You were searched, he observed. Yes. Orlov. Who else? Lucian's expression hardened. He grows impatient. So do I. He crossed the room in 2 strides. You do not understand what he commands. Then make me understand. He stopped. Very close. He commands men who do not hesitate. Neither do I. This is not defiance in a ballroom. No, she said quietly. This is survival. He exhaled slowly. You are forcing my hand. Then decide. A long pause. Then. He reached into his coat and withdrew a sealed parchment. Imperial clearance. Vault access. Signed by the Emperor. I told my father I required final review of the Vale records before marriage, Lucian said. And he agreed. He believes transparency strengthens loyalty. And does it? That depends, Lucian replied. On what? On whether loyalty is deserved. They entered the Imperial Vault at midnight. Only Lucian, Seraphina, and Captain Reinhardt. Torches flickered against iron shelves. The air was cold and stale. Lucian unlocked a narrow case. Inside. Original treasury ledgers. Untouched. Unamended. Seraphina flipped pages quickly. Column after column. Then. She found it. Her father's final audit. The original version. No overlapping seal. No amendment. No illegal authorization. Her hands stilled. He refused, she whispered. Lucian leaned closer. If he refused to approve the transfer. Then someone forced amendment after his death. Reinhardt spoke quietly. Or before. Lucian's voice lowered. Find the signature date. Seraphina scanned. Her breath caught. The amendment was stamped 2 days before his public confession. Silence swallowed the room. He confessed under falsified evidence, she said. And Orlov authorized the transfer, Lucian finished. The truth no longer floated. It landed. Heavy. Real. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside the vault. Too many. Reinhardt stiffened. General Orlov's patrol, he whispered. Lucian moved fast. Close the case. Torches dimmed. The iron door groaned as it opened. Orlov entered. He did not look surprised. Your Highness, he said smoothly. General, Lucian replied. You are conducting security inspection in the vault at midnight? Lucian's expression did not shift. I review what concerns my future throne. Orlov's gaze moved to Seraphina. Curious timing. Transparency before marriage, Lucian replied. Orloff stepped closer to the open ledger. His eyes flicked once. He saw the page. Understood instantly. His smile did not reach his eyes. Careful, Your Highness, he said softly. Some records were sealed for stability. Stability or concealment? Seraphina asked. Orloff's gaze sharpened. You speak boldly for someone whose brother only just escaped the gallows. Lucian stepped between them. That will be enough. The tension in the vault was suffocating. Orloff inclined his head slightly. As you wish. But as he turned to leave, he added quietly. Accidents occur easily in winter. The iron door shut behind him. Reinhardt exhaled. He knows. Yes, Lucian said. And now? Lucian looked at Seraphina. And for the first time, the calculation in his eyes was replaced by something else. Resolve. We do not wait for the wedding. But Orloff did not wait either. At dawn, the palace bells rang unexpectedly. Not for ceremony. For emergency assembly. A servant burst into Seraphina's chamber. Your ladyship, your brother. Her heart stopped. What? He has been arrested again. Adrian was not taken to the palace cells this time. He was taken to the military fortress. That detail alone told Lucian everything. This was no longer imperial justice. This was Orloff. The fortress stood beyond the city walls, carved from stone and winter. Iron towers. Frozen battlements. No court observers. No civilian witnesses. Military jurisdiction. Meaning. Speed. Meaning. Control. Seraphina did not scream when she was told. She did not cry. She simply turned very still. What is the charge? She asked. The messenger swallowed. Collaboration with foreign agitators. Attempted military destabilization. Lucian's voice cut in sharply. That accusation would require council review. It has been granted, Your Highness. By whom? The messenger hesitated. General Orloff invoked emergency wartime statute. Lucian's jaw locked. Wartime statute had not been used in 15 years. Not since border conflicts had ended. It allowed execution within 48 hours. No civilian appeal. No parliamentary oversight. The emperor had not even been informed yet. Orloff had moved first. Lucian left immediately. He did not wait for escort. He did not wait for permission. He rode to the fortress with Captain Reinhardt at his side. Snow kicked up beneath the horses' hooves as they crossed the frozen road. You understand what this means, Reinhardt said. Yes. If Orloff can execute without imperial review, he becomes untouchable. The fortress gates opened only after recognition. Lucian entered without removing his gloves. Without bowing. Orloff awaited him inside the command hall. You move quickly, General, Lucian said. Orloff inclined his head. The Empire moves quickly when threatened. By a 20-year-old law student. By instability, Orloff replied smoothly. Lucian stepped closer. You invoked wartime statute. Yes. Without consulting the throne. I consulted necessity. The two men stood almost chest to chest. You overstep, Lucian said. I protect. You consolidate, Lucian countered. A faint smile curved Orloff's mouth. You grow suspicious, Your Highness. I grow aware. Orloff's eyes hardened slightly. Be careful that awareness does not resemble disloyalty. Lucian's voice dropped. My loyalty is to the Empire. And I am the Empire's sword. No, Lucian said quietly. You are its shadow. Silence fell between them. Orlov finally stepped back. The prisoner will face military judgment at dawn. Dawn is too soon. Wartime statute. Lucian's gaze did not waver. You forget something, General. And what is that? I will be emperor. A pause. And when I am, Lucian continued, I will remember who moved without my sanction. Orlov's smile thinned. Then you had better secure the throne first. Back at the palace, Seraphina paced. The wedding announcement had not been withdrawn. Preparations continued as though nothing had changed. Silk shipments arrived. Jewels were catalogued. Nobles rehearsed congratulations. Her brother was scheduled to hang at dawn. And the palace prepared her bridal gown. The cruelty of it nearly broke her composure. Nearly. A knock. Reinhardt entered alone. His Highness remains at the fortress. And Adrian? He is alive. For now. Reinhardt stepped closer. There is something you should know. She stilled. Orlov's emergency statute requires imperial endorsement within 24 hours to remain valid. And has the Emperor signed? Not yet. Hope flickered. If the Emperor refuses, then Orlov's authority collapses. And if he signs? Reinhardt did not answer. Lucian returned near midnight. Snow clung to his coat. He looked different. Not uncertain. Decided. The Emperor has been informed, he said. And? Seraphina asked. He will review the charge at dawn. That is when Adrian is scheduled for execution. Yes. Her breath faltered. He will attend personally. A long silence. He trusts Orlov, she said. Yes. And you? Lucian's answer came slower. I trust evidence. He stepped closer. We have the original ledger. And Orlov knows it. Yes. Then he will not allow my brother to live long enough to testify. Lucian's jaw tightened. I know. A beat. Then. I will accompany the Emperor to the fortress. She stepped forward. So will I. No. You do not command me. I command this palace. Not my loyalty. Silence. Then. Lucian's voice softened. If you come, Orlov may see it as open rebellion. Is it not? He looked at her. Truly looked. You are prepared to burn the empire for your brother. I am prepared to expose it for truth. The difference mattered. Lucian nodded once. Then you will stand beside me. Dawn broke gray and bitter. The Emperor's carriage cut through the snow toward the fortress. Lucian rode beside it. Seraphina followed in silence. Crowds gathered again. Smaller this time. But no less eager. Rumor had spread. Second arrest. Military treason. Crown scandal. The gallows had been moved inside fortress walls. Controlled witnesses only. Adrian stood once more beneath the rope. He saw them enter. And relief flickered briefly in his eyes. The Emperor descended from his carriage. He looked older in the cold light. More tired. General, he said. Orlov bowed. The charge stands. Lucian stepped forward. Under dispute. The Emperor's gaze shifted. You question military judgment. I question its timing. Orlov interjected smoothly. The prisoner possessed documents related to restricted treasury records. All eyes turned to Adrian. He said nothing. Which documents? Lucian demanded. Recovered during inspection, Orlov replied. Where are they? Seraphina asked sharply. Orloff looked at her. Destroyed. The word echoed. Destroyed. Lucien's pulse surged. You destroyed potential evidence. I destroyed instability. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. This grows tiresome. He turned to Adrian. You stand accused again. Adrian lifted his head. I stand accused by the man who framed my father. The courtyard froze. Orloff did not flinch. The Emperor's expression darkened. Careful. Lucien stepped forward. Father, the original treasury ledger was amended. The Emperor stilled. What? Seraphina withdrew the original copy from inside her cloak. Your Majesty, she said steadily, my father refused to authorize illegal transfers. Orloff's voice cut in. Forgery. Then examine it, Lucien snapped. The Emperor took the parchment. Silence spread across the fortress. Snow fell lightly. Slowly. The Emperor examined the seal. His expression shifted. Almost imperceptibly. General, he said quietly. Explain this discrepancy. Orloff's voice remained calm. An administrative correction. Without imperial consent. It was necessary. The Emperor's gaze sharpened. Necessary for whom? A beat. For the first time. Orloff hesitated. And that hesitation changed everything. The rope still hung above Adrian. But the storm had turned. The snow did not fall gently anymore. It cut sideways in sharp white gusts across the fortress courtyard. The Emperor still held the ledger in his gloved hand. The silence around him was not ceremonial. It was dangerous. General Orloff, he said slowly, why does this seal not match the official registry date? Orloff's posture did not shift. Clerical delay, Your Majesty. Clerks do not press imperial seals, the Emperor replied. The words landed. Lucien stepped forward. Father, the amendment predates the confession. The Emperor's gaze snapped toward him. Are you accusing my chief military advisor of forgery? I am asking you to look. A murmur rippled through the small gathering of officers. Orloff's pale eyes moved between them. You risk destabilizing command in a time of strategic vulnerability, he said evenly. What vulnerability? Seraphina demanded. Orloff did not look at her. But he answered. Borders shift. Alliances weaken. Strength must be consolidated. And that requires fabricating treason, she pressed. Now he turned. Strength requires sacrifice. The word was deliberate. Calculated. The Emperor stiffened. You imply that I sanction this? Orloff's voice softened. I imply that difficult decisions protect thrones. A beat. Then. I protected yours. The courtyard air seemed to freeze. Lucien felt it then. The shift. Not a defensive lie. But justification. Orloff believed what he had done was necessary. And that belief made him far more dangerous. You framed an innocent man, Lucien said quietly. I removed instability. You executed him. I preserved imperial credibility. The Emperor's eyes darkened. You act as though you are the throne. Orloff's gaze flicked to Lucien. And soon, perhaps I will be the hand that steadies it. That was the first mistake. Too much confidence. Too little humility. Lucien stepped forward fully now. You overstep. Orloff's voice hardened. You are young, Your Highness. You do not yet understand the weight of empire. And you do not understand, Lucien replied, that fear is not strength. A flicker of irritation crossed Orloff's face. For 20 years I secured borders while you studied philosophy in foreign academies. For 20 years you siphoned treasury funds to build loyalty inside the army. Gasps. That was the second mistake. Lucien had said it publicly. The Emperor's gaze snapped back to Orlov. What funds? Orlov did not answer. Instead, he raised his hand. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. But the soldiers lining the courtyard shifted. Their stance changed. Not relaxed. Ready. Reinhardt stepped instantly in front of Lucien. The Emperor saw it too. The fortress gates were closed. The archers positioned along the walls had not moved. They were already aiming. The realization settled heavily. This was not just cover-up. This was contingency. Orlov had prepared for exposure. You forget yourself, the Emperor said, but the authority in his voice wavered. No, Orlov replied quietly. I remember precisely what I am. The storm roared across the courtyard. Adrian still stood beneath the rope. Unmoved. Stand down, Lucien ordered the guards. They did not move. That was the third mistake. They hesitated. But they did not move. Because their loyalty was divided. Orlov's voice lowered. You mistake proximity to the throne for control of it. Reinhardt's hand drifted to his sword. Lucien did not draw his. Not yet. You intend to stage an execution regardless, Lucien said. I intend to prevent weakness from spreading. By killing witnesses. By removing volatility. By removing my future empress's family, Lucien said coldly. A faint smile curved Orlov's mouth. A throne is steadier without divided loyalties. The Emperor's breathing had changed. Not fear. Fury. You dare to speak of steadiness in my presence? Orlov finally looked at him directly. I dare to protect what you built when you hesitate. That was the fourth mistake. He had implied weakness. The Emperor straightened fully. I do not hesitate. Then sign the wartime statute renewal, Orlov said smoothly. The courtyard went silent again. There it was. The final move. If the Emperor signed, Adrian died immediately. The Ledger investigation vanished. Orlov's emergency power became law. Lucien's position weakened permanently. If he refused, he admitted doubt. And doubt inside the army could fracture control. The Emperor's gloved fingers tightened around the parchment. Lucien stepped closer. Father. No title. Just the word. The Emperor looked at him. Look at the seal, Lucien said quietly. Look at the dates. Look at the man who benefits from haste. A beat. Then. Seraphina stepped forward beside Lucien. She did not kneel. She did not beg. You condemned my father, she said evenly. If you condemn my brother without truth, history will remember that. The Emperor's jaw tightened. History remembers strength. History remembers justice longer, she replied. Orlov's patience snapped. Enough. He gestured sharply. Two archers drew their bows fully. Reinhardt drew steel. The courtyard erupted in motion. But Lucien stepped forward and raised his voice like a blade. Stand down. The command cracked across the stone. Some soldiers hesitated. Others did not. Orlov's voice cut in over him. Execute the prisoner. Adrian's noose was pulled tight. Lucien moved before thought caught up. He drew his sword. Not at Orlov. At the rope. He struck once. Clean. The rope snapped. Adrian fell hard to the platform but alive. Gasps shattered the courtyard. Orloff's hand moved toward his own weapon. But the Emperor's voice thundered over all of it. Enough. The word struck like artillery. Even Orloff froze. The Emperor stepped down from the raised position. He did not look at Lucien. He did not look at Seraphina. He looked only at Orloff. You forget who commands this army. Orloff did not bow. But he did not move. The Emperor turned to the assembled soldiers. Lower your weapons. A pause. Then, slowly, steel lowered. Archers eased tension. The Emperor turned back to Orloff. You presumed. The general's expression remained calm. I protected. You concealed. I stabilized. You corrupted. A long silence. Then. You are relieved of command. The word struck harder than steel. Shock rippled visibly across the officers. Orloff did not flinch. You will regret this, he said quietly. Perhaps, the Emperor replied. But not today. Guards stepped forward. Not Orloff's men. Imperial Guard. Elite. Neutral. They surrounded him. For the first time. The general's composure fractured slightly. Lucien lowered his sword. Seraphina exhaled slowly. The storm had not ended. But it had broken. Adrian stood. Free of rope. Lucien met his eyes. No words were needed. The Emperor turned to Seraphina. You risked much. So did you, she replied. His gaze held hers. Then. You will not marry my son under coercion. The courtyard stilled again. Lucien's breath caught. You are released from obligation. The words felt unreal. But, the Emperor continued, the Empire still requires unity. Lucien stepped forward. I will choose my marriage freely. The Emperor looked at him long and hard. Then nodded once. Then choose wisely. Orloff was led away. The rope lay cut at Adrian's feet. Snow covered it slowly. The capital did not sleep that night. Word traveled faster than snow. The general relieved of command. The execution halted. The rope cut by the crown prince himself. By morning, the fortress courtyard story had reached every market square and salon in the city. Some called it weakness. Others called it revolution. But all understood one thing. The empire had shifted. 3 days later, the Imperial Assembly convened. Not in secret. Not in restricted chambers. But in the Grand Hall of Governance, where laws were declared, and history recorded. The Emperor sat beneath the crimson canopy. Lucien stood at his right. Seraphina stood not beside him. But among petitioners. Deliberate. Orloff entered under guard. No insignia. No sword. No command. He did not bow. He did not speak. The Emperor addressed the chamber. General Matthias Orloff is charged with unauthorized treasury amendments, unlawful invocation of wartime statute, and manipulation of imperial investigation 22 years prior. Murmurs rippled like wind through silk. Evidence was presented. The original ledger. The amended copy. Testimony from clerks. Transfers to private military contracts. Reinhardt spoke. Then. Unexpectedly. Lucien did. My father trusted strength, he said. And I trusted obedience. His gaze moved briefly toward Seraphina. We were both wrong. Silence deepened. The empire cannot endure on concealed fear, Lucien continued. It must endure on truth. The emperor did not interrupt him. That alone told the hall everything. Orloff finally spoke. You mistake transparency for stability. No, Seraphina said clearly from the chamber floor. We mistake secrecy for loyalty. All eyes turned to her. The Emperor gestured. Lady Vale, step forward. She did. Not as accused. Not as pawn. As witness. My father refused to sign unlawful transfers, she said. He was framed for protecting the treasury from misuse. She looked directly at the Emperor. You condemned him. The hall froze. No one addressed the Emperor so directly. Not like that. The Emperor did not look away. I did. And you allowed his name to rot. A long pause. Yes. The weight of that word settled heavily. But I will not allow the empire to rot further. He turned to Orloff. General Matthias Orloff, you are stripped of rank, title, lands, and military authority. No exile. No quiet dismissal. You will stand trial before civil court. Gasps. Military men were rarely handed to civilians. This was symbolic. Orloff's composure finally cracked. You weaken your own foundation, he said. No, the Emperor replied calmly. I remove rot. Guards led him away. And for the first time in 22 years. The Vale name was spoken without whisper. Later that afternoon, a new decree was read publicly in the square where the rope had once hung. By imperial authority, the herald declared, Lord Alastair Vale is formally exonerated of treason. His record is restored. His estate returned to his heirs. Snow fell again. But it felt different now. Adrian stood beside his sister. No chains. No rope. Just breath in cold air. You did it, he murmured. We did, she corrected. He smiled faintly. And the prince? She did not answer immediately. Because at that moment, Lucien approached. No guards. No spectacle. Just a man walking through snow. He stopped before her. The crowd watched. Waiting. Lady Vale, he said. She tilted her head slightly. Your Highness. I believe I owe you something. An apology? That as well. He exhaled slowly. When my father decreed our marriage, I did not refuse. No, she said softly. You did not. I should have. You cut the rope. That was not enough. A long pause. I do not want a throne built on fear, he continued. And I do not want a marriage built on debt. The crowd leaned closer. Lucien stepped forward. If you marry me, he said quietly, it will be because you choose it. No decree. No rope. No ultimatum. Not because I offer protection, he added. Not because I offer power. Then what do you offer? She asked. He met her gaze fully. Myself. The simplicity of it felt heavier than empire. Snow drifted between them. Seraphina studied him. This man who had once stood silent beside a rope. This man who had cut it. You hesitated, she said. Yes. You doubted. Yes. You nearly lost my brother. His voice lowered. Yes. And now? Now, he said quietly, I choose before I am forced. Silence wrapped the square. She stepped closer. Not as future empress. Not as political solution. As woman. As long as you remember, she said, that I will never kneel to fear. He held her gaze. And I will never rule by it. A breath. Then. She took his hand. The crowd exhaled as one. Not in command. In understanding. The wedding took place weeks later. No rush decree. No emergency statute. No gallows in the distance. Just cathedral bells and winter sunlight through stained glass. Adrian stood beside her. Not as hostage. As brother. The emperor attended. Not as tyrant. As witness. When Lucien spoke his vows, his voice did not carry command. It carried conviction. I choose you, he said. No threat beneath it. No rope above it. Seraphina's reply was steady. And I choose you. Not because the empire required it. But because she did. Years later, historians would write of that winter. Of the general who nearly fractured the throne. Of the prince who cut a rope. Of the emperor who admitted fault. But they would remember most the moment coercion ended. Because empires do not fall only by war. They shift when fear loses its leverage. And in the palace gardens, long after the ceremony, as snow fell softly over bare branches, Lucien leaned close to Seraphina and whispered. No one hangs for love again. And this time, there was no storm gathering quietly. Only peace. The fortress gallows were dismantled within a week. Not quietly. Publicly. The wood was taken down plank by plank in the same square where citizens once gathered to watch punishment. This time, they gathered to watch removal. Symbol matters. Lucien insisted on it. The rope was burned. Seraphina watched from the palace balcony as smoke rose into the pale sky. She did not smile. She simply exhaled. For the first time in years. Her breath did not feel borrowed. Adrian refused any title. When the emperor offered him a court appointment, he declined. I will serve, he said calmly, but not as ornament. Instead, he entered parliament as legal reform advisor. His first proposal. A bill restricting emergency wartime statute powers. The emperor signed it. Without resistance. That signature carried more weight than any execution order ever had. The emperor. He aged faster that year. Not from illness. From awareness. Power unchecked creates blindness. He began holding open councils monthly. Transparency sessions. Public audit reviews. Small steps. But historic ones. In private, he once told Lucien. I ruled through fear because I thought stability required it. Lucien replied quietly. Stability requires trust. The emperor did not argue. The trial lasted 6 weeks. He did not beg. He did not apologize. He defended his actions as necessity. But necessity cannot erase evidence. He was sentenced not to execution, but to imprisonment. Permanent removal. Lucien insisted. No more martyrs, he said. History would remember Orloff not as savior, but as warning. The wedding was not extravagant. Deliberately. No gold spectacle. No political theater. Only close allies. When Lucien lifted Seraphina's veil, he did not see strategy. He saw choice. That mattered more than empire. And when he kissed her, no one wondered whether it had been negotiated. That night, in the quiet of their chamber, snow falling beyond tall windows, Lucien stood behind her as she looked out across the city. You could have left, he said softly. I could have. Why didn't you? She considered. Because I did not want to win by escape. He wrapped his arms around her gently. And now? Now, she said, watching the palace lights flicker in the distance. We build something no one has to survive. He pressed his forehead lightly against hers. Not even us. Years later, children would study that winter in imperial academies. They would learn that a false seal almost reshaped the throne. That a prince cut a rope rather than inherit silence. That a woman stood before an emperor and did not kneel. And they would learn one line most of all. You cannot secure a kingdom by hanging truth. If you felt your breath tighten when the rope tightened. If your pulse slowed when it was cut. If you believe power should answer to courage. Then you belong here. Subscribe for more stories where love stands against empire. Where truth outlives fear. And where no decree is stronger than choice. Because the next story may pull even harder. And somewhere in the palace archives, under glass and official record, the original treasury ledger remains. Seal unbroken. Ink unaltered. Proof that even empires can be corrected. Snow still falls in winter. But no rope hangs in that square anymore.